Hi everyone, I hope you're all well and welcome to episode 98 of the James Layton Fitness Podcast. So within this specific episode we'll be discussing a very common question I get asked when I start working with new coaching clients. That is, what should you do if you go over your carbohydrate target, or what should you do if you go over your fat target within the context of a fat loss phase? So first, it's really critical to realize, as I've spoken about many times before, protein and total calories met by the end of the day are really the two most important factors within a fat loss phase. So protein, making sure that's sufficient to preserve as much muscle mass as possible, and then total calories tailored to that individual to achieve fat loss, to actually create the energy deficit. The absolute ratio of carbohydrates to fats doesn't really matter as long as protein is matched and total calories are matched. This should really be up to your personal preference. However, there's a couple of nuances to this statement that I'll discuss within this podcast. However, that's the main foundational principle. You need to understand that protein and total calories are the most important factors met by the end of the day within a fat loss phase. And therefore, if you were to go over your carbohydrate target, make sure all you would simply do is just draw back your fat target to match total calories, and then vice versa. So for example, if you went over your fat target, you would simply draw back carbohydrates to match total calories met by the end of the day. The only macronutrient you should not manipulate is protein. We need to keep protein sufficient and constant to maintain as much muscle mass as possible, but there is some room for maneuver with regards to carbohydrates and fats. The only thing you need to realize is there's 9 calories per gram of fat and there's 4 calories per gram of carbohydrates. That's the only thing you need to remember when you're manipulating the two macronutrients. One other caveat to this is to try and keep your fat intake approximately 30% of total calories. I wouldn't drop this lower than that in most situations. There can be exceptions. For example, a bodybuilder prepping for a show and they're very close to their competition and we're trying to eke out that last little bit of fat loss. You may drop fat maybe slightly lower than this just to continue creating the energy deficit, but this would only be for a short period of time. The main reason we're trying to keep it approximately 30% or above is because fat is very important for hormone production. Fats are essential to the body, so that is the main reason. Now, another caveat to this, despite what I just said about the most important factors within a fat loss phase being protein, total calories, the other thing we need to consider is trying to preserve our gym performance, trying to preserve our strength with our weight training, and as such better preserve lean muscle mass within the fat loss phase. And one of the ways we do this is trying to keep our carbohydrate intake as high as possible. Carbohydrates will have the most influence on training performance, how well you perform in the gym, and as such I will try and keep these as high as possible within the fat loss phase. Now obviously when you reach a plateau, you have to manipulate your calorie figures to decrease them and or increase cardio, and therefore you may need to make a reduction to carbohydrates. But that will be my other considerations to think about, trying to keep those carbohydrates as high as you can throughout the fat loss phase, and that will really allow you to better preserve lean muscle mass within the fat loss phase. And then remember, that's our secondary objective. We have two goals within the fat loss phase: trying to lose as much body fat, and that secondary goal is to try and maintain as much muscle mass as possible. But hopefully that's helped. This is a question I get asked all the time: what do I do if I go over my fat target or carbohydrate target? Simply draw back either carbohydrates or fats to match total calories, but make sure you keep that protein figure constant, because that is critical to preserving as much muscle mass as possible within the fat loss phase. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to speaking to you next week. If you're still yet to download my free ebook, How to Set Up a Nutrition Plan, if you go to James Layton, Layton fitness.co.uk, you'll see a tab at the top of the page and you can download that immediately. Additionally, if you're still yet to subscribe on iTunes so you don't miss an episode each week, please do so as well. Okay, thank you very much. I'll speak to you soon.